Bouquet. Hi, my name is Ann Zemke. I work with Allison at All About Color Quilting, and this exhibit that we're going to show you is my one-woman hand piecing, hand applique renaissance. This quilt is Big Blooms. The pattern is by Wendy Williams of Australia, and we chose a background. It's one of Kaffe's spots, and it's hydrangea. It's a softer color. We originally thought about white, but that was too stark, so this certainly softened the look of the quilt. I hand pieced each one of the designs and all of the hexagons, but the inner one, after I hand pieced it, I turned under the edges and appliqued it onto a fussy cut center floral, and then tucked these pieces underneath and appliqued the blue onto the orange. But this quilt was offered a little bit of a challenge to me because Wendy Williams is a beautiful, wonderful designer. Her pattern lacked a little bit in instructions. For example, there was no size given to cut the background fabric, so I had to figure that out based upon the number of pieces that were in the outer border. But every quilt kit that we offer, we include a tip sheet, and that tip sheet is something that I create as I'm working on the quilt. My learning moments and learning opportunities, I write down, and then we create a tip sheet that's included in each of the kits. But the first thing I started with was the stems, and then I did the flowers. And another thing that was not included in the pattern, it said to make some large ones, medium ones, small ones, but it didn't tell you exactly how many or where to put them. So you just had to do that based upon the picture. But again, that's in the tip sheet. And then the last thing that I added were the leaves, because I just filled in the spaces as I needed to. Some looked like they were placed on the pattern, but others I just placed where I thought was important to fill in the space. Then we added a spot binding to it. The next quilt is Hen House, and that's by Claire Turpin. And this quilt is just a plain old fun quilt to make. All of the hens are appliqued, and Kaffe's fabrics lend themselves so well to fussy cutting, and it's so much fun to figure out, different fabrics and place them so that they highlight his fabrics, but also the fussy cutting is so much fun. And this quilt has a hen, and it also has a fox, and then all of the houses. But like I said, just a fun quilt. This quilt is Golden Days. The pattern is Golden Days by Jen Kingwell, and we named this one Golden Days. It has grunge background. It has 5 different colors of grunge background in it, so that it blends well together. And this quilt, I hand pieced and hand appliqued. So all of the blocks here are hand pieced, and these are hand pieced. These, I believe I did these by machine, but other than that, everything else is done by hand. And I use freezer paper prepared applique method, and there's a tutorial of me showing my method and how I do it on allaboutcolorquilting.com's website. And also there's a tutorial of me showing how I do hand piecing on the website as well. But this pattern, and again, in my tip sheet, I offer some of my learning moments. Some of these blocks, or some of the pieces in the blocks, you would think that this is an isosceles triangle, but it's not. This triangle is a mirror image of this one, and the same thing with these. These are mirror images, and it wasn't until I tried to put the entire block together and it wasn't fitting that I discovered that. So you have to be careful that this one and this one are flipped. And all of the quilting on these, with the exception of one, is done by Allison. This quilt is called Penny Tree, And it's a pattern, it's a very old pattern. It's from the mid-1800s. And we chose a grunge background. The color is fig. And then chose colors that would allow the little trees to radiate out. And the quilting on this quilt was done by Margaret Solomon Gunn, and she did just a marvelous job on it. But again, I used the freezer paper prepared applique method, and I love to do circles, but the circles are easy to do with the freezer paper. And we chose to, there was another border on this quilt in the pattern that had little tabs on it, and I tried making the tabs, but grunge doesn't curve well, and because of the stiffness maybe of the fabric, so we opted not to put the tabs on, and instead we included a small amount of piping on the edge. This quilt, Kaleidoscope Stars, I hand-pieced, and we chose colors so that we had a rainbow effect. We sell a template to cut the diamonds, and the diamonds are cut from floral Kaffe fabrics and that have a repeat to them, so that we cut each diamond on the repeat so that the star would radiate out and have a design effect, usually in the center. But the next quilt is Spring Bouquet by Adidas Sitar and Laundry Basket Quilts, and this quilt is the first one that I did with Kaffe fabrics where I stepped out of my very traditional box. I was a very, very traditional quilter, and if you look at this pattern by Adidas, it's a very traditional look, light background and more subtle colors. But we chose a Kona cotton, and the color name is Pickle, and very, very fitting. The Kaffe fabrics, and the reason we chose this color is the Kaffe fabrics really pop off of this, and again, lend themselves to a lot of fun, fussy cutting. And then I think one of the key elements of this quilt, and it's very, very busy, but it ties itself together because I used one particular fabric of blue in each one of the blocks. And because of that, if you stand back and take a look, there really is some unity to what could be a very chaotic looking quilt. This quilt, Jack's Chain, a very traditional pattern, and it's hand-pieced except for the 9-patch blocks. I did each one of those by machine. Again, I picked the large florals and centered one in the middle of each one of the blocks, and it's hard to see where the blocks are, I guess, but this is a block. That's the yellow block. This is the green block. And then those are sewn together with the diamonds. There's another one of the blocks. Here we have another couple fun quilts. This one is a free pattern. We named it Paisley Splash, and I obviously fussy cut the elephant so that would highlight the fabric, and then I placed all of the design elements here. I tried to follow the pattern as best I could, but again, I had some difficulty getting them in the right place, so I kind of did my own thing. But Laurie did a nice job of quilting it by stitching in a paisley in the quilting. We named this Ella for the elephant. This quilt is Christmas Tree, and the pattern is by Pacific Rim, Nancy Lee Chong. And when I saw the pattern, I immediately liked it. But the pattern, the Christmas tree is just done in a plain red, so we chose a floral of Kaffe's and cut the design out. And this one, again, I did freezer paper prepared applique, and I drew the Christmas tree on the freezer paper, and then I cut the design out, cutting on all of the lines, and then I had a tangled mess of a Christmas tree. Once I untangled the freezer paper and laid it out on the back side of the floral fabric, I ironed it on, but I ironed it on in stages, and then turned under the edges with my glue stick in stages, because if I would have ironed the entire piece on and then started handling the freezer paper, it probably would have come off. And if you go to our website, there is a written tutorial of how I did this quilt and did it in stages. And again, there's a tip sheet that goes along with the quilt so that you can learn from my learning opportunities. This quilt is called Flying Pansies, and I pieced it by hand. It has an Aboriginal dot background, so it kind of softens it. We didn't want a stark white background. It's a public domain pattern, and we enlarged the pieces of the pansy a little bit so that it would highlight the Kaffe fabrics. But I hand pieced each one of the pansies, and it was kind of nice because I didn't have to worry about matching the center. At the end, I appliqued a circle on top of the center. But I tried to use the fabric and fussy cut so that I got some secondary designs out of it. And here's another one. And we have templates that you can use, cutting templates that you can use for this quilt. Oh, and the border on the top and the bottom is cut in one piece, and then it's appliqued onto the quilt top. This quilt, the pattern is by Kim McLean, and it's called Glorious Garden. This is one of my earlier ones when I was in a hexagon phase. But each one of the hexagons, larger hexagons, has 12 smaller hexagons sewn in a circle, and then the large floral is I cut in a circle, and I turned under the edge of the hexagons and appliqued the hexagon ring onto the large floral. Then, after I got all of these blocks done, then I started putting on the sashing, the yellow sashing. And for example, this block, I put all of the yellow diamonds on, and then every other one would have all of the diamonds on, and then this one would fit in, and I'd fill in the blanks that needed to be filled in. And this is a row of flowers, and it's joined to this row, etc., down to the bottom. But a happy quilt. This quilt was my first hexagon challenge, but it's called Chevron Hexagons, and it's based on a pattern by Tula Pink, Hex on the Beach. And it blends so well together that you probably can't even see that there are hexagons in there. But if there was ever a need for a Kaffe design wall, this is the quilt. Kaffe has a design wall that is gray flannel, and it has a 2-inch grid on it with squares. So it has lines that go this way and lines that go horizontally. And you're able to line up all of the hexagons, because if you take a look, and you have to look very carefully, this is a row of hexagons, and then there's another row of hexagons, and I hand pieced each one of these hexagons together into a strip, and then put it up in on the design wall. Then I hand pieced this strip, put it up on the design wall. Then after I got all of the strips together and lined them up on the grid work on Kaffe's design wall, then I started joining all of the rows together. And I enjoy hand piecing because, especially when you get so many Y seams like this, you hand piece, and because you only stitch on the lines, you don't stitch all the way to the end of the piece, all of the seam allowance is open. So when you're trying to do a Y seam, it's much easier to do a Y seam. These two quilts are patterns by Jane Spillar, and she usually in her patterns suggests using fusible, but I used my freezer paper prepared applique method. This one is called Ornamental, and this is probably a beginner applique pattern if you're interested in learning how to do freezer paper prepared method. But again, used some of the large florals and cut out the design elements on here, and it's quilted very densely with a bunch of pebbles. This one is Tree of Life. Used a large floral by Kaffe, and for all of them, and fussy cut the birds and the flowers, and hand appliqued on here. The border is pieced. This is one of my favorite quilts. Those angels just look like they're singing. We called the pattern Earth Angel, but it's the pattern is by Kimberly Rado. And when I originally saw this pattern on the internet, I immediately thought about our liturgy and music director at our church, and I made this quilt as a surprise for him for a birthday and sent it to him in the mail and suggested that he hang it either at his home or maybe in the choir room, whatever. And he sent me a photo back, and it's hung behind his desk. So I was very pleased that he did that. But the angels, we have, I used templates and fussy cut the designs for the skirts and hand pieced them all together, and then appliqued the heads on the quilt. But the quilting on this particular quilt almost makes those angels look like they're singing. This quilt is Bird's Eye View by Irene Blanc. She's an Australian designer. And we use grunge background, and we use two different colors for the background, one for the center panel and then another for the background, or the border, in order to highlight it. And boy, if there isn't another opportunity for using fussy cutting of Kaffe fabrics, this is really it, because you really get a good chance to highlight and even put the eye on the bird. Again, used the freezer paper prepared method, used the bias tape maker, using one of the shot cottons, a striped shot cotton for the binding. And these pinwheels around the edge on the border are hand pieced and then appliqued onto the border. The last two quilts, again, are patterns by Jane Spillar, and this one is called Midsummer Dreams. And the background fabric is Essex cotton with a metallic thread. And you might think that that would be difficult to applique to, but it's not. It's really a very soft and pliable fabric, and I had absolutely no problems in doing the applique on this. But I fussy cut the flowers and then appliqued them onto the background. And I like this pattern because the borders aren't all the same size. I like the fact that it has some weight down on the bottom. And when Lori quilts these, she uses one cotton poly bat with a thin wool bat over, and because she stitches in the ditch around each one of the design elements, and then quilts very densely, it makes the flowers and all of the design pop up, and a lot of people think that it's trapunto, but no, it's not trapunto. And the same for this quilt. The same technique was used in the quilting. And again, I hand appliqued the flowers and all of the designs on here using freezer paper, and we fussy cut a a fun border that accents all of the colors. But thank you for coming to my tour. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did.